No,
So you actually outlined what I thought was a quite persuasive argument that I think is optimally designed to appeal to a moderate or even a liberal who's open minded. Can you lay that out?
yeah. So the argument I discussed in the piece, which is by no means the only one that could be made with the goal of persuading liberals, classical and leftist, is basically just to point out that the numbers don't add up. Let's take Europe. Uh, countries like the UK are getting several 100,000 net migrants a year. Similar numbers in France and Germany. Obviously, lesser absolute numbers in smaller Northern European countries, but similar percentage wise. And the way many liberals and leftists look at this is, oh, this is just the natural rate of immigration into Europe at the present time. This is the market rate, or this is the rate that um, has arisen through whatever processes affect the immigration rate. And if you want to bring it down, then you're a racist, or you're voted only by xenophobia. And if you want it to stay the same, you're a good person, a a well-informed person who's reflected on the issue and come to a reasonable judgment. But of course, they don't. What many, by no means all, don't recognize is that this actually reflects only a small percentage of the people who would like to come and live in Europe
Right.
from Middle East and Africa in particular. I mean, we have these surveys from Gallup where they basically just ask a sample of people in different countries around the world, are you thinking of migrating? Would you like to move to another country in the next 12 months? And where would you like to move? And sizable fractions in the population in some of these rapidly growing poor countries in Africa and some parts of the Middle East say they would like to move to Europe or the US. And of course, as desirable as the US may be, it's not easy for them to get there, but it is quite easy for them to get to Europe. And if you extrapolate from the surveys, you conclude that hundreds of millions of people would like to come to Europe. And it's understandable why. They have many of them have relatives over here. They have smartphones. They can see what life is like in a European city as compared to the cities in which they dwell. The infrastructure is of much higher quality. There are more shops. I don't know. There are pretty women walking around with
Scant clothing.
yeah, less modest clothing, etc. So the levels of migration into Europe are not given by nature. They're actually already, as surprising though it may seem, heavily restricted.
Right.
I.e., most of the people who would like to come don't, because they know if they just turned up, they would be turned away, or at least a large percentage of them would. But if we adopt the policy of, anyone that wants to come here can, if they can make it, then we would quickly be overwhelmed. And I think even most bleeding heart liberals would be forced to concede that it's simply not possible to accommodate everyone who would like to come, especially given the scale of population growth in the parts of the world where most of these so-called potential migrants are concentrated.
Right.
And of course, if you can imagine a different world, you can imagine that history played out differently. And in the year 2020, let's say 90% of the world's population were white Europeans living in Europe, Canada, US, Australia. And let's just suppose that only 10% of the population was living in the rest of the world, meaning that the ratio of people living in the origin countries was very, very small relative to the number living in the destination countries. And in that case, it would be feasible to accommodate everyone who wanted to come.
Right.
I mean, it might still not be desirable from a restrictionist point of view, but it would be much more feasible than in taking the numbers that want to come at the moment. But that isn't the way history played out. The way history played out was that there was a population boom in outside of the West, and the West population is increasingly stagnant. And as a result, the numbers don't add up. So then the next stage of the argument is to ask, well, if we're already heavily restricting immigration, why would we impose costs on ourselves? And here you presumably want to mention costs that are most salient for people on the left, like the risk of far-right government, which is widely held to be a sort of existential threat to democracy, the risk of ongoing tensions between Muslim communities and white lower class communities in Europe. Why would we introduce
decline in social trust? Another important one that I appeal to, because that tends to reduce desire for collective action in welfare programs that these people generally support.
Yeah. Why would we want to not only introduce those tensions? I mean, they've long been present, but why would we want to exacerbate them by adding even more immigrants every year? And the answer can't be, well, we have to help anyone who wants to come, because we've already accepted that we're excluding, I don't know, 70, 80, 90% of the people.
Right.
We're just saying that this arbitrary level is the moral one.